You're listening to At the Core with Sarah Friend, in which I have conversations with women in leadership. As the president of a firm, I'm honored to be a leader and have this platform to connect with other women in leadership, to talk with them, hear their stories, and celebrate their unique journeys and impact. Throughout her nearly 30 years at the Partners Group, Doreen Barnhouse has made a significant impact on our people, culture, and operations. I have had the privilege in working with and learning from Doreen for the last 16 years, and I'm thrilled that she is willing to share her journey here. Doreen's life, her willingness to step into the unknown, her artistic nature, her love for people, her sense of humor, and her appreciation for the unique gifts of each individual make Doreen a very special executive leader. Well, welcome, Doreen.
Well, thank you for having me.
I am so excited. You are my first podcast guest that I personally work with. I am so excited because, you've been here at the Partners Group since the beginning of the Partners Group.
Yeah.
And you're at this stage in your career where we just have a few years left. They're the Doreen bonus years for me.
I'm not fading into the sunset.
No. And I think that there are so many lessons that I have learned from your leadership that I would love to share with all of our listeners before you continue to step into your post-career life, not retirement, because you have so many things I know that you're going to be doing. But I just appreciate you being willing to share your story and talk about some of your superpowers as a leader.
Well, thank you. And I would also like to hear from you, like what you've learned, because, coming from an outside perspective, I don't always know what other people are gleaning or what I'm giving. So that'd be nice to know.
I'll for sure share that. We'll lean into a lot of those things in this conversation. So I'll be thinking about that.
Great.
Before we get into the work, let's talk about how you grew up. I know you grew up in a small town in Washington and you love that time in your life. So tell me a little bit about what makes Doreen tick.
I grew up in Grand, Washington, and small town, and loved the outdoors, learned to love the outdoors. We didn't have neighbors and had a lot of freedom, had the opportunity in the world to live at a time where we could be outside and were encouraged or told to be outside
free range children before free range was cool,
or you get chores. So we go out and play. And yes, I was very fortunate to have a twin sister with an older sister. My twin sister, so I was never alone. Basically, even though we lived kind of isolated without neighbors. I do love the outdoors. We grew up camping, hiking, being out in the woods. I've done some mountain climbing just because of my boyfriend, getting into things like that. I had a great opportunity. I worked at Mount Rainier and so hiked a lot. So I have a real deep appreciation for nature and the world. And also, at a time when I was growing up, it was about what we're really talking about today is climate change. And that was a really big issue when I was growing up. And so I was really passionate about that. Yeah. I think partly because of my personality, but also because I was so deeply entrenched in growing up in the woods and appreciating animals and the trees and the smells and all of that that message really resonated with me. And it's something that I hope to do on my spare time after TPG and even now that my kids are gone and in college, I have some free time to really devote to that.
Isn't it fun to imagine, to have those passions that started at such a young age, and now to picture this future where you're actually going to have time to kind of go back to those core passions and invest time and your gifts and the gifts of you as your older self, right?
With the wisdom.
Right.
Yeah, and some of the intellectual tools that you know how to get things done.
Yeah.
Where early me was more about passion, just go and just make it happen, and I'm going to do something without really knowing what that would be.
Yeah.
And now having some really lifelong tools of organization and implementation and getting things, how to ask the right questions and have more patience and not kind of bully people to my way of thinking.
Right.
And it's frustrating. I mean, I'm not the most patient person. So having to navigate political dynamics to slow things down, and also to not get too sad about progress. I do try to, there's also a lot of really great messages. We tend to be attracted to the more negative because it's more doomsday kind of thing. But there's a lot of real positive, and I have a lot of really great faith in humankind to be able to intellectually solve this problem because we've solved so many problems.
Well, you asked me in the beginning what I've learned from you, some of the things from an outsider's perspective, because as you articulated so well, sometimes we don't even see the lessons we're teaching others around us by just living our life. And I think what you just shared for me is such a good example of some of the one of the things I've learned from you. And that is just the importance of curiosity. And when you see a problem, I love that you get in and do your research. You read books, you listen to podcasts, right? You're free to have challenging conversations with people who have alternative perspectives and love the art and the benefit of debate, right? But you've never shied away from being exactly who you are, right?
Thank you.
And so I think that's definitely one of the many lessons that I have learned from you is to be bold and be yourself and state your opinion clearly and be curious about alternative perspectives at the same time, because I also see you have very deep connected relationships with people who have very different opinions about all sorts of things, right? And that's not very common today in a very polarized society, right?
Not as popular as it used to be.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Yeah.
But getting back to other people and the ways of thinking, I really am a strong believer that iron sharpens iron. And so people that I gravitate to, like yourself, would be the strong opinions, passionate with belief, but also is willing to understand that there's different ways of thinking and people don't know everything. And I've definitely learned over my lifetime that I don't know everything. I've made some big mistakes, had to backtrack, had to apologize, had to really test my own values and my beliefs. If I'm wrong, do I say I'm wrong? Do I learn more? Or do I get entrenched in the way I want to believe and the way I want it to be? And I really have decided that's not who I want to be. I want to be a person who can accept reality, as it is. Take it as it is for what it is, and then move forward. Yeah.
I mean, you have held a lot of jobs at the Partners Group, but why don't you give a little bit of background for how you went from Mount Rainier and this free spirit, passionate about the environment 20-something to an insurance agency in Portland, Oregon.
No, isn't that so it's sad if you just listen to that?
It does sound sad, but it's also, it's so unexpected. And we'll get to the explanation of why it's not as sad as it sounds.
Well, I really loved working at Mount Rainier, and I did for many years. I started there when I was 20, and then I moved here when Mount St. Helens blew off because nobody was coming up as tourists. So decided I needed to go to college because I didn't go to college out of high school. And picked accounting because I wanted to be a world traveler and make more than minimum wage. Everybody needed an accountant across the world. That was my logic. I also like math, so that wasn't a hard subject to pick. through various jobs. It was at the time when computers just came out and was helping entrepreneurs figure out their accounting systems on computers and the programs, and they would get them messed up. And so I would untangle it and then kind of teach them how to fish and then move on, because I'm not a great maintainer, and that wasn't what I wanted to do. It wasn't a problem to solve anymore. And that's how I landed here at the Partners Group, which was then Kerr Insurance. We have a small company with 4 people, and ended up being a really fantastic opportunity for me. I was someone who, through the life's journey, had a lot of different kinds of experiences with entrepreneurs. I loved creating from scratch. So starting businesses, I'd had experiences with doing that. Working with difficult vendors, with tax entities, through other kind of employment that I had, people going out of business and kind of cleaning up after that. So it was a really great opportunity when I started here at Kerr Insurance, because it was a growing firm that merged to be the Partners Group in 2000. And got to do everything. I got to do the books, I got to run the operations, I got to do the people, got to develop the processes. And I didn't know anything about insurance. And I was not thrilled to say that I was going to be insurance, because it sounded like kind of a dead...
just not the career of a free spirit that
the career. I had worked at the Scanner newspaper in Portland it was a Black newspaper here in Portland, and it was about news and being on time. And although I was doing the accounting, it was still working for an organization that was dealing with current events. And so then when I came into an insurance, it wasn't really the view that I had, which I think a lot of young people would come into this industry and think that same thing, like, but it is such an integral part of our economy. It is such a need for organizations and people to have adequate coverage and planning for their employees or businesses. And for me personally, it allowed me the financial freedom to do what I wanted to do in life, building a family and what have you, and still going places that I wanted to go. So although it doesn't sound exciting, there's so much excitement in it, because it grows in so many ways that I can build on. I can create new processes, I can create new strategies, I can match people to strategies and things that I really like to do.
Well, and for somebody who is a self-proclaimed person who doesn't like to maintain, to be at a single company for what, 30 years. Okay.
Yes.
So, this is my lesson number 2 from Doreen. And that is, I have learned so much from you about the importance of giving employees the tools for them to truly understand themselves. And then for us as leaders, peers, team members, to understand really the drivers, characteristics, communication styles of our peers, right? And say, okay, everybody is uniquely made. Everybody has unique gifts, right? Whether that's you're just born with those traits or you've learned some skills through your life experiences, right? We come into the space very different. And there's no good or bad. There is just recognizing that you may be somebody who is, a hard driver, and you want to make, take action and, get to decisions quickly. And we need those people who can get to decision quickly and get us unstuck as a team. We also need people who are slower, who really want data first. They they're more steady, right?
Yes.
They accept change slowly, right? We need those people. Or slow it down,
yes,
right? We need them equally.
Right.
And so you have just ensured through your DISC trainings that every employee has this gift of going through this analysis, and then you personally going through that with them is, I think, probably something they've never done before. It allows people to learn more about themselves as individuals and shows that you as a leader care deeply and personally about that person as an individual,
Which I do.
Yes.
It's so wonderful to have that time with people. And I think for myself personally, and I don't know if you've experienced this, but it's so freeing when you recognize.
When you're reading that report and you really feel so valedated.
Yes. Well, because I do love that we're all uniquely and wonderfully made.
Yeah.
And I do say that to people because it's so true. Is that there's so many elements that make us who we are.
Yeah.
But it's so freeing as a person.
Yeah.
To recognize that people are all doing what they're doing because of their own package.
Yes.
And that has nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
And we can just accept people for who they are. Early on, I think when I was younger, you take offense about they did this to me because of this or that. And then you recognize that that's not the case at all. They're just acting and behaving the way that they're made.
Yeah.
And it's very freeing. You can really just work very openly on any issues or brainstormings. You don't have to think about people having an agenda or any of that. You can release all of that, and it's really so freeing. It makes your life so much less complicated.
Yeah. Well, and I think to have a culture where we really embrace that, really trying to understand and respect the strengths, the unique strengths of each individual, and recognizing our own strengths, right? So we do both DISC here at the Partners Group and Strength Finders. And I like both, but Strength Finders for me was even more freeing because I love the premise of Strength Finders in that it measures over nearly, I think, 40 varying strengths. And the premise is focus on your top 5 strengths. Because if you lean into those strengths, you will increase your effectiveness, productivity, impact on the world exponentially more than trying to improve your bottom 5.
Right.
And we so often are looking at ourselves and going, what are the things I'm not good at? And I'm going to try and make improvements on those things.
Right.
Rather than going, it's important for me to know what I'm not good at and understand where my weaknesses are. But if my goal is to be the best version of myself, the most impactful version of myself, I'm actually going to leverage my strengths and forgive myself and let go of the things that are on the bottom, but just be aware that those are areas that I am not strong in.
Absolutely. And that goes hand in hand with DISC, because DISC could be your behavior, your preferred behavioral style. When you're working in your gifts, you're not having to think as much.
Yeah.
And when you're trying to work in areas where you're not as strong, you're having to adapt and think about how am I doing this? How am I doing this? So you lose a lot of, if we're looking at jobs, you're losing a lot of productivity.
Yeah.
So if we want ourselves to work, if our goal at work and in leadership is to build strategies where we become profitable and efficient. And so having people working in their highest and best strengths or use, they're going to get more done because they have the ability to work in their strength. They don't have to think as hard.
Yeah.
When we have people that are working on highly detailed work and they're not highly detailed people and they're going to make mistakes, then their coworkers get frustrated. And then it creates this performance management issue. And it's like, in that performance management, are you really dealing with the right thing?
Yeah.
Is the right thing to say, get this person up to not make mistakes? Or is the right thing to put this person in a position where they don't even have to go there? They can be working on something that's more creative, where a mistake is a different thing than in a data point, for instance.
Yeah.
So that is what the freedom that you have into really delving into people. And then also people being aware. So when we're training people and we're showing them this, as we become more aware of who we are, we can speak up and say, that's something that I'm not really great at. Do we have someone else on the team? And we do empower people here to speak up. We want people to have a voice. We do trainings even on difficult conversations. So we want people to be able to, we don't want to shut anybody down. So that has created a very open, trusting culture, I believe, and one we would want to continue to encourage.
Yeah. Okay, that leads me to lesson number 3.
Wow. Great.
I know, it's very affirming.
Yes. I love it.
And that is one of your superpowers that I think is well known through this organization, is your ability to care deeply for people and have hard conversations. Mm-hmm. And that is not easy, especially in leadership. And you've been responsible for human resources for decades here at the Partners Group. And so naturally, that role and leaders in that role are in a position where that's an important skill set to have.
Yes.
We do a lot of learning here, as leaders. And one of my favorite books around hard conversations in the last few years has been Radical Candor. Mm-hmm. So the idea of radical candor, right, is it's these 4 quadrants of communication. Mm-hmm. And in the upper right is the quadrant of radical candor. And that is where in a conversation, you are demonstrating, you're challenging directly. So you're showing concern for the issue. You're pushing the issue forward, not trying to sweep it under the rug to avoid the hard conversation, but you're challenging directly and caring personally for the individual. And I think you model radical candor so effectively in our organization. And that has been something that we look to you as a coach and a mentor so that, we can carry on a tradition of being able to handle hard conversations in a very human way that leaves people really feeling cared for, but not unclear.
Right. Well, I do borrow from that statement you have adopted recently, which I love, clear as kind.
Yes. Thank you, Brene.
Yes. And which I do really like that because that is 3 words that you can really remember and it's pretty concise. Yeah. So I really care deeply. One of my strengths is individualism. And so I really care about each individual here and who they are. Before I go into any hard conversation, I really put myself as much as possible in that other person's shoes and try to think about how they're going to receive the message that I need to tell them.
I've seen you do this, right? And that when you're preparing for a hard conversation, you actually pull up their DISC report to really remind yourself, what is this person's preferred communication style?
That's right. So they can receive what I'm trying to say, because I do believe, I also, my DISC is there's high red or high decisive dominance. And so I'm results oriented. Yeah. So we're not getting the result we need. And so we're not being kind by not letting people know that we're not getting the results and their part in it. Yeah. We also have some steps on how to have these conversations to lay it out logically so that people and own it. Also, what would be my part in this not happening? What have we done as an organization or me personally to have contributed to this not being the result? So I do work through that process of really being very intentional about how the person is going to receive the message, the words that I'm using. And I'm also not afraid to make mistakes. Yeah. So, and I'm also not afraid for what's going to happen. So I think so many times why people avoid having hard conversations is that they're forecasting what's going to be the worst case scenario, the bad result, and partly because of my DISC profile, I can take a hard conversation. So people might be upset, they might be angry, they might have some critiques, or they come back. I'm okay with that. Yeah. So that helps understanding that it's all good. I'm not trying to hurt anybody. I'm not, and I really feel a heart and to show compassion in those conversations. And I don't mind what's going to come from that. And I can't predict it. I'm not trying to control it, and I'm not trying to predict the outcome. I just need to get the message across, because I do believe clear is kind. Yeah. Because I know in my own situation, even though I don't like to hear certain messages, how many times God, I wish you would just tell me. Yeah. Right. And that's totally how I feel.
Well, and I think that clarity, it's not intuitive, right? But that clarity and that willingness to challenge directly and care deeply creates such an incredible trust between your employees, your team members, and you as a leader, because they don't have to guess. Right. Because if you have created a culture where, hey, if I've got a hard conversation to be had, we're going to have it. And so if we aren't having a hard conversation, you don't have to imagine that there's something being unsaid.
Exactly.
Right.
Right. And to that point where anybody could feel free to come into and ask a question like,
yes,
something wrong here?
Yeah.
Is there something going on? And then to give an honest answer if somebody really comes to you and not sidestep it.
Right.
But I think it's really important that people try not to be perfect. Even if you sidestepped it.
Yeah.
If someone came in and you weren't prepared to be like, that was my opportunity and I missed it. Feeling to go back and say, you know what? I'm so glad you came in. I do have something on my mind and I think you must have read my mind or felt it, but here's what it is.
Yeah.
And we're always trying to, and we're really high performers here, so we're always trying to do things right the first time.
Yeah.
And it's okay to not be right the first time. And I think that's a really huge lesson for everyone because I think we want to be perfect. We have a desire to be perfect. People don't want to be criticized. But it's all right to be criticized. It's all right to apologize. It's all right to do it wrong. And it's all right to recognize in yourself that you're not going to do it right.
Yeah.
Giving yourself the freedom to just be who you are and to also recognize that sometimes you're not emotionally ready to have hard conversations. Or as a leader, I think we hold ourselves to these high standards that we got to be number one and on the spot and ready to go at any time and recognizing that that's not the case and to give yourself some grace on that.
Yeah. I'm embracing this idea of imperfect progress because, you and I have worked together for 17 years and I've been lucky enough to be on the executive leadership team with you for the past 7. And you're high red. I'm about as low red. So basically, don't even register, right? And so that means I can get stuck.
Yeah.
Right? Because I'm high green, which is high steady, and also high yellow, which is, high influencer. But I can also, the downside of high yellow is that I can fall into people pleasing. Right. And perfectionism. And that can get me stuck.
Right.
And so how do I get unstuck? It's this, exactly what you're talking about. It's this core belief that imperfect progress is exponentially better than staying stuck.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm a huge believer of that.
Yep.
Yeah. And then part of it's just because I'm super high red. Which is
you never get stuck.
Well, I just need to move forward. I can move forward. I need people to slow me down.
Yeah.
So that's where we have teams which work really well. And it's because I have an impatience to for heaven's sakes, let's just move on.
We've had some of those conversations.
Enough. So, that's why it's really great for us as an organization. We've taken the time to look at our teams and know our strengths and weaknesses and to build together, to make informed decisions, but to make progress. We are a company that desires, we've always been this way, and it's one of the reasons why I'm here, is that because one of my strengths on Strength Finders is futuristic. So I'm always thinking of the future and what's going to happen. And how it's going to happen and how it's going to unfold. And so that need for me to have problems to solve that way, we do look to the future. What is the world doing? How do we stay relevant? How do we provide for our employees, but provide for our customers what we need in products and services and to staying relevant?
I haven't thought about this in a long time, but it's so interesting it's coming up for me in this conversation is, when we first did DISC, it was early on in the formation of our executive leadership team. I remember getting my report and going, oh God, I don't belong on this team because our CEO, was off the charts red. The people who I thought were the stereotypical strong leaders. My DISC was like the opposite. Right. And it's taken me a long time to know to be true, not talk myself into, but actually change my whole paradigm of thinking and say, no, there isn't one profile that equals great leader.
Right. Exactly.
Right. Any profile can really be an amazing, effective leader in an organization.
Well, DISC is just one element. That's like your preferred behavioral style, how you show up.
Yes.
But your values, the strengths, there's so many things that come into what makes a great leader. Yeah. And there's so many elements. And great leadership evolves over time, too, depending on what type of company, what type of problems there are to solve. Yeah. But I think that's also why it's really important to have a leadership team, not just one leader. I mean, we have a CEO, but we have a leadership team with varied strengths. Yeah. And having the top leadership,
diversity,
CEO be willing to listen to the people that they're peers with, because we're all different, and something to meet the changing problems that are coming for the company to address as the future grows. Yeah. Past leaders said, what got us here is not going to get us into the future. Yeah. And so that is a great statement, which talks to, we need to constantly evolve in our leadership. Yeah. I mean, so what was for me leading in the past years is that right leadership going forward, because we have a different problem to solve. Yeah. But constantly looking at having those honest conversations, I think is a really value of this organization.
You're absolutely right. And that commitment to collaboration, right? And slowing down to listen to others without giving up your authority to make the decision, right? That old school way of thinking around, if I ask for people's opinion, I'm somehow giving up authority to be the power and authority to be the leader. It's like, no, you're actually equipping yourself to make a better decision, but you still can decide how you're going to make that decision. Right. But the more I think you can collaborate within the time bounds, of or time constraints of any particular scenario. Sometimes you don't have the time. Right. Sometimes time dictates how much you can slow down to listen. Right. But most problems that we're solving don't have to be solved within an hour.
Thank goodness.
Thank God. Right. Yes. And I think as leaders, post-COVID leaders, really, which is so weird to say because it just, that's fresh,
I know.
But we are dealing with new challenges that leaders have never faced before. Right. So we can't look in the rear view mirror and say, this is the way it's been done for the last 30 years. And so we're just going to tinker with this. Right. We have experienced a significant change. And so as leaders, we have to change.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. We have to be open to that. Yeah. And embrace it in a lot of ways. But you're absolutely right. What did work isn't necessarily going to work on new problems. Yeah.
Communication, listening, collaboration is even more important.
It's crucial. Yeah. And what we've always desired to do here is to not necessarily do everything the world is doing. So we've also looked at our people. What do our people, what do we want for them? Yeah. What is our culture? Yeah. And so that also takes a little bit more work to really make that slow it down to make that informed decision. Yeah. So
I don't know if many companies that do DISC profiles on every new employee.
Right. I know. I don't either. I think it's become more popular, definitely, as the recognition of the importance to build strong teams and have a diverse selection of skills. I think it's become more popular. I can't think of any. I haven't done any employee. I had an interview with any employee where they didn't enjoy learning this about them.
Yeah. I just wish I would have been able to do it 30 years ago.
I know. That's what I tell some of our younger people that have come into the workforce, and they're getting it at 24 and like, wow, who would I be now if I would have known this? Yeah. Because it is so powerful to give you confidence. Yeah. The insecurity of like, oh God, I don't do this well, or I don't do this well. And then you see this report where you're like, oh, it's not that I can't do it, but this is one of the things I like to do better. Yeah. How much more freeing that would have been for confidence but it is what it is here now.
Yeah. And recognizing it may not look exactly the way that you think it needs to look. And in terms of once you really understand your strengths, your values, what matters most to you, if you can find a company that needs your strengths and aligns with your values, industry is not really an issue. And so that's why a free spirit from Mount Rainier can thrive in an insurance agency for 30 years.
Absolutely.
You're using your unique gifts. You're giving those unique gifts to everyone that has the opportunity to work with you. And you've gotten to reinvent yourself, solve new problems, be around people, care deeply, challenge, create in this very unexpected company.
Yeah. So I think that's well said, that it doesn't matter what the industry is.
Yeah.
And I would be a testament to that. And so when you're seeking like, oh, wow, this is really great, or this is, you really have to look at what's important to you.
Yeah.
What are your values? What do you need? What gives you intrinsically?
Yes.
What gives you motivation to get out of bed every day?
Yeah.
And finding a place that can solve those questions for you is going to be a win. I feel fortunate.
Me too. All right. As we wrap up this conversation, which I have loved.
Thank you.
I always end the podcast with talking about which core value of ours, of our 5, resonates with you the most. It might be hard for you because you live here.
Well, I like be a champion. We started out with win, 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 which I love because I strive for that all the time. I like negotiation. I love negotiation where everybody wins.
Yes.
That to me is the ultimate in life.
Yeah.
You don't always get every piece that you want, but everybody wins and walks away in agreement.
Yeah.
Is such a great value and way to go forward. So we named it Be a Champion because people may not get win, win, win. But I like that one the best.
Yeah.
But I do like playing well with others because sometimes we can go negative and start thinking, why did they really do that? Or what? And then if you say play well with others and you're like, I'm going to think good thoughts and think that they have good intentions. But I do, we're doing a retirement today on Own It, a person that exemplifies Own It.
Yeah.
And so that one, I think, definitely resonates throughout the organization is that we hire people and they say they're going to do the job and we say, okay. And our people own their jobs and they do it. So all those values are so important and is really who we are.
I think it is. And it attracts the right people and weeds out the people who aren't attracted to those values.
Yes. Right.
So, and it helps accelerate that growth of our culture in the direction that we want our culture to grow.
I believe that we have people come to us and say that we are as good as we said we were, and it feels really good, and they'll come back to us even. So that's very rewarding. Yeah, where we can be that light in the world, where it seems sometimes where there's a lot of negative. Working at some place where it feels good. Yeah, and you can be your authentic self, I think is the highest compliment.
Well, thank you for all the lessons you've given me since I started here so many years ago. And thank you for the Doreen bonus years. I'm really glad that you stuck around a couple of extra years because you're a huge mentor of mine. And I just absolutely love working with you.
I love working with you too. It's a love fest because you are definitely, Sarah Fran, one of my favorite people to work with.
Well, we definitely complement each other's discs. Yes. we're two opposites. Yes. Yes. So that
they fit in like a puzzle piece.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
This episode of At the Core with Sarah Fren was brought to you by The Partners Group. Visit us at thepartnersgroup.com or find us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. We'd love to hear your feedback. At the Core with Sarah Friend is produced by the Partners Group marketing team. Our content writer and editor is Carrie Conroy. Taylor Kapik handles audio engineering and graphics. Kyle Lusk is our podcast administrator, and Alyssa Mueller is in charge of project management and guest outreach. Courtney Atami oversees our podcast production. Find all of our episodes at thepartnersgroup.com, as well as on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Advisory services offered through TPG Financial Advisors, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor and wholly owned subsidiary of the Partners Group, LLC.